All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 284. And today, I am going to talk about something controversial. Before everyone starts dogpiling and talking about how I've gone all political and everything, the purpose behind this is to actually talk about kind of the psychology and motivational aspects of something that's been happening it's been happening everywhere, but the gaming world has been seeing a huge change in this particular thing. And I've actually had quite a few conversations with friends about topics surrounding this. And I think a lot of people are kind of missing the point of what's going on right now. What I'm talking about recently in the gaming space, there has been a quote-unquote attack on woke ideology and DEI and use any other word you want to use. And while a lot of the reporting on it is hyper-sensationalized and is meant just as much as an attack as the people that actually are attempting to kind of attack that entire industry, I think a lot of people are missing what's actually going on here. And so I wanted to talk about the actual kind of economic ramifications and the kind of psychological motivation-based approaches that various groups have been taking, and how that's actually changed, to be perfectly honest, the digital world just in general, and the entertainment industry just in general. But it's coming to a head in video games right now, and I see a lot of people that seem to be completely flabbergasted that this is happening right now, and they can't seem to wrap their heads around, well, this doesn't make sense. This isn't possible. How can people be doing this? Well, because you're not looking at what's actually going on. So what do I mean by this? If we go back, God, I'm going to see if they actually have a date for it. I'm not sure if someone actually recorded the date for it. First YouTube adpocalypse. I want to see if somebody actually... Yep, September 2016. So, why am I talking about the YouTube adpocalypse when this is going to be about gaming? We're going to get there. So, back in 2016, there was a thing that a lot of YouTubers referred to as the adpocalypse. And the reason why is pre-2016, the channels that made the most money were very different than after 2016. And everybody on the platform, absolutely everybody on the platform, saw a massive reduction in ad revenue. And it wasn't because the algorithm changed, or it wasn't a decision that YouTube made. What it was, and I can't remember the people that instigated it, but it was a political thing. And if I remember correctly, simply because this has been kind of the playbook of this particular group of activists for a while, because up until recently it was unbelievably effective. There was a bunch of kind of hyper left-leaning activists that did not like quite a few right-leaning activists, or just right-leaning creators in general. Some of them were activists, some of them were just kind of right-leaning people in general. And they kept trying to come up with a way to get them deplatformed, to ensure that there was no way that they could exist because they just didn't like them. And so they came up with this brilliant idea of, because they tried reporting to YouTube. YouTube didn't care because YouTube was making money off them. And here's the thing that a lot of people just don't seem to realize. As long as YouTube's making money, a lot of times they really don't care. That's why things like 5-minute crafts exists. By the way, if you watch 5-minute crafts and think that any of it is actually real, I've got a great bridge to sell you on Mars. So what they did, what this activist group did, is they went directly to advertisers. And what they would do is either, and this, it wasn't 100% either one of these things, but there was both of this mixed in. Either they would watch, while they were watching YouTube, they would see an ad for this company come up on some of the more questionable videos on YouTube and would screenshot it. Or, and this did happen and it has been proven that it did happen, they would just keep refreshing over and over and over and over again until they could get an ad for something that they wanted to contact, like a Pepsi ad or something, on content that they thought that company would disagree with. I'm not saying that 100% of it was either one of those camps, but it's been proven both of those things did happen. It did happen organically, and they also manipulated data to make it look like it happened significantly more frequently than it actually did. So both those things happened. And so they would like contact Pepsi and they go, "Hey Pepsi, how long have you been supporting this horrible thing?" And then they would show the video, and all you would see is the title of the video, which normally was inflammatory enough on its own, and then their ad playing on that video. And these big companies that would pay a lot of money to YouTube to do ad buys went, "Ooh, this is bad. We don't want to be associated with that stuff." And so as a knee-jerk reaction, a bunch of really, really big advertisers pulled all their ad funding from YouTube. And YouTube, because again, up until this point, they were making money. They didn't care. And then they saw all the money go bye-bye, and they did care. A lot. They really, really cared. And so they overcorrected to try to do everything that they could to kind of prove and show that, no, that's not what's happening. That was a mistake, or, it did happen before, but we've changed it. And the end result of that was, first of all, because all the all the companies pulled those ads, or ad revenue, everybody on YouTube got hit really, really bad. And then after all the changes it made, it meant that people that used to be making money could no longer make money in that particular way, especially since 2015, early 2016, YouTube had gotten extremely, quote unquote, edgy. It was just very extremely kind of pushing the envelope style content. It became very, very aggressive. And because of that, channels that promoted just outright, trying to think of words I can say without YouTube burying this video more so than it normally does for my channel, content that was offensive, to say the least. Let's just call it offensive content. And so even like established channels had been flirting with kind of more dark comedy and the things like that, and making off-color jokes and not quite absurdist content, because that's a whole nother very fascinating aspect of comedy. But again, very, very edgy, and edgy became poison, and a lot of channels got demonetized, and a lot of channels were forced to change their entire content profile in order to be able to remain on the channel. And there were a lot of channels that didn't survive, and they went to other places like Twitch and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a really, really big deal that massively changed how YouTube works. And the thing that I want to focus on here is not how effective it was, but the actual psychological motivation tactic they were using here. This particular form of manipulation can be related to either abuse or blackmailing. Effectively, what they were doing is, hey, if you don't do what we want, we're going to tell all these people that this is what you stand for and you're going to lose a lot of money. That's what these activist groups were basically doing to like Pepsi and Walmart and stuff like that. It's like, we are going to tell people that you do these horrible things. And this is the linchpin to how this form of manipulation works. If they know this, then they won't like you anymore and they won't buy your products. That is the clutch to this, because if you've ever heard the phrase, don't threaten me with a good time, threats only work if for two reasons. One, you think that they're legitimate, and two, that the result is actually going to happen. Like, if I threatened that if you don't like this video, that I will make molten lava cakes. You know, those little cakes that in the middle it's got like a ganache, so it's all like molten and stuff. I will make molten lava cakes fall from the sky if you don't like this video. Nobody believes that can actually happen, because it can't. That's not a thing. Like, weather doesn't do that. So that would be a completely baseless, pointless threat. This threat, however, it had never really been done before in this particular way. Yes, smear campaigns and stuff like that are a real thing. They happen all the time. And they are a business tactic. They are 100% a business tactic. Anyone that doesn't think that for literally centuries, businesses have been spreading false information and doing smear campaigns against their competitors has not been paying attention. This is a real thing, and depending on how you're doing it, it's either considered unethical or outright illegal. But it's never been considered a good way to run a business. It's just effective. And so that's why the first adpocalypse really happened, was this threat of, hey, listen, you do what we tell you to do, or we're going to hurt you. We're going to hurt you in sales. And it was very, very effective. There was a second adpocalypse. I can't remember what that one was actually about, but it was like 4 or 5 years later. It was the same basic playbook, though an activist group decided another activist group they didn't like, and so they started targeting it and targeting the advertisers. And now it's become an extremely common practice for both sides, but to be perfectly honest, the left started doing it first, and they're better at it. I've watched right-leaning groups try to kind of attack the money, and a lot of times they're just not very good at it. And the few times that they have been, they actually use very, very different tactics in order to be effective. The left has just kind of mastered this art of manipulation, and that's one of the reasons why the stuff that's happening now is so confusing. So let's fast forward quite a few years until a game called Hogwarts Legacy gets announced. If anyone doesn't know what Hogwarts Legacy is, it's a video game where you get to go to Hogwarts, you get to be a Hogwarts student, and weird shit happens. It's a standard Harry Potter game. It actually reviewed very, very well. I'm going to say this to see if I can get everybody to just hate me all at once. I own it. I played it. I bought it on sale because I sure as hell wasn't going to pay for that thing full price. It's a fun game. What more is it? It's a well-made, fun game. It's not the best game that has ever been created, but it's fun. And it uses the source material relatively well. It doesn't create massive, weird contradictions or anything like that. Overall, it's a good game. However, if you've been living under a rock for the past, half a decade, the creator of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, is a rather controversial figure. And this is not me saying either side is right or wrong. The discussion itself is significantly more nuanced than anyone is willing to admit. And the idea that anyone that is on one side or the other is either entirely altruistic or is an evil, disgusting piece of shit that deserves to die is just wrong. It's an extremely complex issue, but it involves trans ideology, trans rights, and that entire kind of sphere of ideas, which again is unbelievably complex. It's very, very confusing. It's not something that I want to discuss here because, first of all, I don't understand a lot of it, and second of all, neither do you. And so it would kind of be like me having a long discussion about quantum entanglement with a third grader. Both of us have very little understanding of quantum mechanics in general, much less the idea of quantum entanglement. And for the most part, the only reason that I know what quantum entanglement is I read an article on it once that barely explained it in like a Bill Nye dumbing down version of quantum entanglement. It's a completely pointless endeavor, especially since I have no plans to get into quantum physics at all. I am never going to make a healthy contribution to the field of quantum physics ever. So me having a conversation about quantum entanglement or string theory or anything like that is rather pointless. Because it doesn't matter if I'm right, I'm wrong, I'm smarter, I'm dumber. Nothing is going to change. That being said, there was what the activist groups call a boycott on the game. And I'm going to explain why 100% it was not a boycott in a little bit. But they wanted to call it a boycott because boycotts in and of themselves, they have a long history in the US and around the world of being very effective economic tools to invoke change. And when they're done right, they're extremely effective. Again, what activists did is not a boycott. Basically, what they decided to do is it started off as simply, oh, J.K. Rowling is attached to another product. She actually wasn't attached to Hogwarts Legacy in any way, shape, or form. It just so happened to use her intellectual property. So she did. I don't know if she personally would have granted the license or anything like that, but the people that own the Harry Potter IP, which is more than just J.K. Rowling now, had to license the property to, I think it's Portkey Games, in order to make it. Which, due to the fact that their name is Portkey Games, I'm assuming there's a much closer relationship with the Harry Potter franchise than just this single game. But I actually don't understand everything there. However, because she was associated with it and they vehemently despise her, they decided that, well, we're going to boycott the game. And the way they went about that is they went on this active harassment and antagonism campaign. What I mean by that is instead of just going, hey, I'm not going to play this game and I don't think you should either, they would target anyone they possibly could and go, if you play this game, I am going to find out where you live. I'm going to find out where you work. I'm going to tell your boss that you are a phobe, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to make sure that you lose your job. I'm going to tell your family that this is the kind of person you are. I'm going to convince your wife to leave you. I mean, it got vicious. There were websites that were set up to find out if streamers played the game. There were people that were actively doxing anyone that said anything nice about it. If anyone is wondering, that is not a boycott. A boycott, for anyone that wants to actually run a boycott, again, is extremely effective method, economic method of promoting change. And the way that a boycott works is you find a product, you find a company, and you don't buy shit from them. And you convince other people not to buy shit from them as well. And in that very basic example, it sounds like what this group did is 100% a boycott. They were convincing people not to play the game. No, they were threatening people. There's a very, very large difference between threatening and coercion versus just simply convincing someone or requesting, hey, don't do this. The way that effective boycotts work is, first of all, they're extremely organized. If you want an actual effective boycott, you actually have to have someone organizing it. And it involves things like getting the message out in a lot of different ways. It can't just be, well, I tweeted about it, and that means it'll work. Tweeting doesn't work that way. You have to have letter writing campaigns. If you really want to piss people off, you can do cold calling and stuff like that. And I have seen boycotts that have done that to a very effective way, in a very effective way. But it takes a special kind of crazy to be able to do cold calling without, first of all, pissing off everyone you call, and second off, just going completely insane. But a lot of times it involves things like setting up kind of information booths and stuff like that in public to go, hey, join us in our boycott doing this. Hey, this is why we're boycotting this. These are the reasons that we're doing it. Can we get you to pledge not to? And one of the most important aspects of a boycott is getting this call to action, because asking people to not do something from a psychological motivational standpoint, asking someone to refrain from doing something is a significantly weaker commitment than asking them to actively do something. So if you actually want them, if you want people to participate in a boycott, generally the simplest way to do it is you get signatures. Now, signatures are not legally binding or anything like that. There's nothing that says that you can't sign something and then go and do exactly what, sign a boycott and then go and do that exactly. There's nothing stopping you. But the actual act of putting pen to paper and doing something physical, just signing your name, makes the retention rate of people that agree to join the boycott to compared to the people that actually do the boycott significantly higher. And so that's generally how boycotts work, is you get this as large an organization as you can get, and you are constantly contacting people, you are giving them as much information as you can, and then you are asking for some sort of commitment. Hey, can you sign this petition? Hey, can you, do this, do that? Because if all you do is ask them not to do something, again, from a psychological standpoint, it's significantly less likely that it's going to make an impact in their brain, that they're going to remember it at all. Now, what were these activist organizations doing? Well, they weren't asking people not to do something. They were threatening them, if you do this, we are going to end your existence. We are going to dox you. We are going to get you fired. We are going to get people that you like to distance themselves from you. We are going to end your social life completely. We are going to destroy your ability to support yourself, support your family. These are very, very serious threats. And one of the reasons why they were so vicious in this particular game, because again, the game itself is really not that offensive. It wasn't. Again, I've played the damn game. One of the things that they tried to do early on was claim that it was extremely, what's the word for it? Anti-Jewish. Anti-Semitic. There we go. It's extremely anti-Semitic. If anyone doesn't know, I am Jewish. And I grew up in Wisconsin, which was mostly settled by German settlers. I sat in a gym class where a kid ran around screaming, yeah, Auschwitz, and other things like that. That's what I grew up with. So very familiar with anti-Semitism. It's not fun. The game is not anti-Semitic in any way, shape, or form. It never has been. It's mostly anti-Semitic people that find tropes that they attribute to Jews. Like one of the most popular myths that anti-Semites like to put out there anytime you're talking about a fantasy world is any race that is somehow really, really focused on money is obviously an anti-Semitic trope, because Jews are really focused on money. You don't know why there are so many Jewish people in banking and things like that? Because for a lot of times it actually wasn't illegal to discriminate against Jews and say that, no, we don't hire Jews. But the one field that they didn't do that in was banking. There's also, if I remember correctly, and this is going back to pre-medication days, so I might be getting this wrong. If I remember correctly, there were certain jobs that, depending on how closely you followed the Jewish faith, there were certain jobs that would conflict with certain beliefs. And so, again, you had this kind of subset of jobs that the extremely religious Jewish people simply wouldn't take for religious reasons. Then you had this subset of jobs that people just didn't want Jewish people doing, and so they weren't allowed to. And then you had this very small group of jobs that people were like, you know what, that's fine, we'll do that. And so, yeah, the reason that there's so many Jewish people in finance and banking and stuff like that is they literally couldn't do the vast majority of other jobs. They got kicked out of all of them. And surprisingly enough, when you take an entire group that tends to keep to themselves already and force them all into a single job field, they get really, really good at it. So anyway, the reason that these groups were so vicious in this tactic, to which it caused a rather big backlash, was because this tactic had worked extremely effectively before. Lesser versions of it. Again, the reason I talked about the first adpocalypse is that was the kind of genesis of this idea of, well, if we can't get what we want, we're just going to threaten the money in some way. You notice that one of the tactics that these activist groups used in their boycott was to say, hey, we're going to find where you work and we're going to tell your boss. It was the economic thing of, yeah, if we can't get Twitter or Twitch to get these people off the platform, well, then we'll hit them in the money. Because it doesn't matter what part of society you are in. If you find a way to make a company lose money and find a way to connect it to a certain practice, that company will stop that practice almost immediately. That's just how it works. It's remarkably difficult to make that connection without sounding like these groups, which eventually backfires, but we'll get to that in a second. So the reason these groups were doing this is they had been emboldened by, if it was 2016, we're talking about at that point 7 or 8 years of this being an extremely effective way to coerce compliance. And this is an extremely common abuse tactic. Anyone who has been abused, whether you were bullied, as a kid, whether you were in some sort of abusive relationship with a significant other, if you had abusive family members, if you've had abusive bosses and things like that, financial abuse is a real thing. And not only is it a real thing, it is an extremely effective method of control. In a lot of abusive relationships, the really, really bad controlling ones, one of the most effective methods of control is to find a way to take control of their earning potential. And an extremely common way to do that is a joint bank account. It doesn't sound like a bad thing. It's like, well, we both live in the same house. Why don't we just kind of pool from the same thing? But as soon as they have access to your money, they can start implementing styles of control. Oh, you know what? I created a savings account for us. Oh, no, that sounds like a great idea. How do we access it? Don't worry about it. I know you're not quite as good with money as I am, so I'll take care of the savings account. You don't have to worry about that. You know what, honey? You made this purchase and it was just a really bad idea, and now we're not going to be able to make rent for the month, or you know what, our utility bill is going to be a week late. You know what, I really don't think you should have the checkbook. Just to make this simple, I'll take care of paying the bills, and I'll hold on to the checkbook. And then anytime you need to purchase anything, you just ask me for a check, I give it to you. It's super simple and easy. This is a real abuse tactic. That happens all the time, and it is unbelievably terrifying to live in. Because what eventually happens is the abuser gets complete financial control over you. And if you want to leave, you literally can't. You will be completely destitute. You will have no place to live. You will have no income. And being homeless and broke is a terrifying experience for anyone. And then combine that with the other forms of manipulation and control that most abusers will use, and it becomes a very dangerous thing. That is effectively what this group was doing, is they're like, we are going to control how much money you can make, and you will do what we tell you to do, or we're going to take your money away. So remember when I talked about the idea of coercion and threat, they're only effective if, one, they can happen, and two, they're believable or something like that. Yeah, they believe that it can happen. Well, all these people that were getting threatened, first of all, the activist group threw way too wide a net, where they were just attacking anyone and everyone that they possibly could. And it became very, very clear that the activists in and of themselves were a very, very tiny group. And there was no possible way that, because finding out and like doxing someone, unbelievably difficult, unless you're like really, really good at that stuff, or the people are really dumb. It's remarkably difficult to be able to find personal information about people, especially with all the different services that are now available that allow you to like scrub yourself from the internet. Speaking of that, this video no one sponsors my videos. Why would anyone pay for this schlop? No, I'd love, if anyone wants to sponsor my videos, you're welcome to. But no, nobody sponsors this shit. Anyway, I thought that was funny. People started very quickly realizing that these threats were very, very empty. And even if they had the manpower to do it, they relied entirely on your boss caring that you played a video game. And a lot of people started realizing, okay, let's say they can do this. I don't actually care. I really don't. That doesn't bother me, and I don't think it's going to bother my boss. And something insane happened. This group became so militant and so aggressive that they went from the underdog heroes trying to fight for basic human decency and rights to the evil shadow organization that was trying to control everyone through fear and hate. And they created a rebellion. Like, literally, this is what happened. They went from being the good guys to being the bad guys so fast. And everybody that got threatened by them, everyone that saw what they were doing, were so disgusted with the incredibly underhanded and evil tactics that these people were doing. They were targeting kids, they were targeting people's jobs, just normal everyday people that they decided that they didn't like. And they were targeting genuinely nice YouTubers and Twitch streamers and the things like that that just simply didn't have a dog in this fight and refused to kind of join in their hate campaigns. And so instead of convincing people not to play the game, they actively convinced people to purchase the game, if for no other reason than to show these people that they had no power. Buying the game and playing the game became a statement against tyranny. It became a statement against abusers, against these horrible, disgusting people that were threatening to do these extremely vile and unimaginable things. And as a result, kind of the same, it can be compared to the Streisand effect. If you're not familiar with that, the Streisand effect is effectively Barbra Streisand had this mansion on the coast. And this company went and took a bunch of pictures of the coast in California to document erosion of the coast in general. And Barbra Streisand's house was in one of those pictures. Now, it wasn't labeled as Barbra Streisand's house or anything like that. But she saw that her house was in one of the pictures, and she got her lawyer to send this cease and desist letter claiming privacy violation of privacy laws. And because of that, up until that point, that particular picture had been downloaded like half a dozen times, And the majority of those downloads were actually from, or the majority of those views, it was viewed like half a dozen times because they were able to see that. The majority of those views were by Barbara Streisand and her legal team. No one was looking at this picture, and the few people that did were not looking at it because they thought, oh my God, it's Barbara Streisand's house. But after she sent the cease and desist and made this massive, massive deal about it, there was like a triple-digit percentage increase of people downloading, and it was downloaded thousands of times in a matter of days. And so the Streisand effect is basically this idea of if you try to cover something up, it will actually make it more popular than if you just kind of ignored it and it had gone away. This isn't technically quite like that, but it operates on kind of a similar principle where their goal was we're going to stop people from buying this game. And what actually happened is it was the #1 selling game of the year. It broke Twitch streaming records. So it wasn't just that people went out and bought it. Tons of people played it. Tons of people watched people playing it. It made a shit ton of money. There's a sequel coming out. Literally the exact opposite of what this group wanted to happen. And because of that, a massive shift changed. And the reason this shift happened was, again, since 2016, these activist groups in general had been able to control a lot of different things by saying, hey, we're going to tell people that you support this, and then you're going to lose lots of money. And most businesses felt that that was a legitimate threat. Because, again, they had used those tactics years ago. Probably still do today. They're just much better at it than most of these activist groups because businesses understand how to do it without sounding like asses. And so up until this point, all of the power of these activist groups, and again, I'm specifically using the term of activist groups and not like the LGBTQ community or anything like that, because I have a lot of friends that are part of the LGBT community. I follow a lot of creators that are part of the community. The vast majority of the community are wonderful people. Activists in general, and this is not just specifically LGBTQ activists. This is just activists in general in this day and age are not nice people. And I sometimes describe myself as a disabled rights activist. I've been pushing myself away from that term simply because activists are just not good people. Again, due to how effective these activist groups have been, and it wasn't just the adpocalypse, these tactics have been appearing in a lot of places, but the adpocalypse was probably the biggest example of how effective the tactics could be. And from that point on, these tactics became more and more aggressive and became more and more acceptable in activist communities in general. So this is not me, decrying anything about the LGBTQ AI plus community or anything like that. That is not a discussion that I want to have on this channel because, again, it's just like the quantum entanglement thing. I don't know anything about it. The vast majority of you know less than I do. Unless you are actively part of the community, which, again, there's probably a large portion of my viewer base that is in some way, shape, or form part of the community. But I'm not. And so my opinions on the community really don't matter that much. Like, I'm not going, no matter what I do, I'm really not going to make a big splash in the LGBTQ AI plus community. Like, I'm not going to change anything in that community because I'm not a part of it. In the same way that I'm probably not going to do anything to really change the African American community. Because if you haven't been able to guess, not part of that. Don't have any African ancestry in me whatsoever, to my knowledge. It's just not a group that I'm a part of, and I'm okay with that. I don't see any problem with people that are a part of that group, but I don't really see any purpose in me doing anything to attempt to change that group. It's not my place. So, so the Hogwarts Legacy debacle, for lack of a better term, changed the script. And it showed companies that all of the theoretical power, because up until this point, activist groups had never actually had to pull a trigger. They had never actually had to go forward with their threats. The threat the threat itself was enough to compel obedience. And we finally had somebody that called their bluff. And it wasn't Portkey Games that did it. It was all of these regular ass people that weren't involved with the game whatsoever, but were still threatened. They went, okay, I'm going to call your bluff. And they instantly found out that the threat had no merit. They couldn't actually follow through on their threats. And that changed the industry completely. One of the things that we've been seeing recently in the entertainment industry, just in general, is a lot of companies are getting rid of their DEI initiatives. If you're not familiar with that term, DEI is diversity, equity, and something with an I, inclusiveness, something like that. But it's basically the E is probably the most important aspect of the DEI, the equity, the idea that we are going to force equality in outcome. That's what equity is not equality in choice, meaning that everybody has, or equality in opportunity, which means everybody has the same opportunity to do something. It is equality in outcome, meaning we are going to ensure that the people in whatever field are going to 100% accurately represent the actual demographics that are out there, whether they want to or not. I have very strong opinions about equity. I'm not going to get into them here, but that is probably the most important aspect of most DEI programs. And we're seeing across the board, companies are getting rid of their DEI initiatives. They're firing DEI staffs and things like that. Movies, video games, and stuff like that are considered quote unquote woke are doing extremely, extremely poorly in sales in general. This was not true 4 or 5 years ago. The difference is, again, there's been this massive threat looming over all these different groups that if you don't do what you are told, we will end you economically. And somebody finally called their bluff. And unfortunately for them, the bluff was exactly that, a bluff. And this has happened, if somebody had called the bluff during the adpocalypse, I don't think it would have had the same effect, because I think there would have been economic fallout from it back then. Because, first of all, the apocalypse in and of itself was much more organized than the boycott for Hogwarts Legacy. And the threats that they were making were significantly less severe. So they could have gone through that. But now, this group, their mouths were writing checks that their fists couldn't answer. They simply were thinking that they had significantly more power than they actually did. And because of that, they have basically discredited anyone that uses similar tactics. And they have painted that discreditation on the entirety of kind of the woke movement and the anti-racist, the anti-phobic movements that have been gaining steam for so long. Again, this is not me saying that all those groups are the same. This is not me saying that they're somehow wrong or anything like that. It's a completely different conversation that I don't want to have. This is me talking specifically about psychological motivation. They made threats. Somebody called their bluff. And it's just like in elementary school. As soon as one person stands up to the bully and shows that the bully's true power is that of fear, once you stop being afraid of them, they lose the vast majority of their power. Now, does that mean that all bullies go away as soon as you find out? No, because a lot of bullies were also very, very large and could still hurt you. However, the vast majority of the time, like most bullies were not going around punching students. They were threatening to punch them. They were threatening to do things. The threat was all that was required for compliance. Because as soon as they start throwing punches, other things start happening. Like they get suspended or expelled or get criminal charges and the things like that. So they can't actually completely follow through with it, even though physically they could. And that's the same thing that happened with Hogwarts Legacy, and we're seeing the fallout now. These bullies got called out. People stood up to them, and they realized that the bullies don't have any actual power. And now all these companies are realizing, wait a minute, we don't have to do what they tell us because they can't actually hurt us. Oh, well, in that case, you guys are assholes. Go away. And that's what we're seeing across, again, we're seeing it especially hard in the games industry, where basically, like the SBI detector, if you're not familiar with this, somebody made a website that basically listed any company that either Sweet Baby Inc. Claimed that they worked with, or that the company itself claimed that they work with Sweet Baby Inc. If you're not familiar with Sweet Baby Inc., they are a consultation firm that claims to be able to be effectively, I guess, kind of like sensitivity consultants. However, they have a track record of the games that they consulted on just being hot garbage, and having really, really bad writing and stuff like that, because these people don't actually understand how to tell compelling stories. They just know how to kind of preach at you. And so I don't know if the website still exists, but there was a website called SBI Detector, and it basically was a one-stop shop for people to be able to see if a game had some sort of connection to SBI. And then the actual boycott started happening. It wasn't that SBI Detector was going into business and go, hey, if you use this company, we're going to economically destroy you. There was no threat. They were simply gathering data and then giving it to other people and saying, hey, this is why we don't like this company. These are the games that they've worked on. We're asking you not to support them. They didn't say, if you support them, we will dox you and show everyone that you support this. First of all, that would be a really stupid thing to attempt to do. And second of all, they don't have the resources for that. It is legitimately the definition of a boycott, and it has been unbelievably effective. Square Enix recently announced that they were no longer partnering with SBI. The company itself, if I remember, I might be wrong on this because I've heard conflicting stories, but I've heard that financially they're not doing great and they've had to lay off some of their staff. I'm not 100% certain that's true, because again, I've heard conflicting reports, so take it with a grain of salt. But their reputation in the industry is horrible now, and quite a few other consultation firms have received similar treatment. None of this could have happened if we didn't have the debacle that was the Hogwarts Legacy boycott. Because again, it was the thing that broke the floodgates. People figured out that the threat that kept being used to coerce people into obedience couldn't be acted upon. And when that happened, there was this huge revolt, and now people are actively fighting against that. Do I think that this is a good thing for the video games industry? Technically, yes, simply from the idea that I don't think anyone should have that much authority in a market, especially since the video games market in and of itself, I believe, and feel free to fact check me in the comments, I believe the video games industry is the most, has the highest revenue of any entertainment industry in the world. Bigger than Hollywood, and has been for quite a few years now. A small group of activists should not be allowed to control what happens in a market that large. It's not good for the market. It's not good for the consumers. It's not good for anyone. There really should never be a small group of people that gets complete control over a large market. It's a bad idea. It instantly turns monopolistic, and monopolies are always bad for the consumer. 100% of the time, there's not a single time where a monopoly isn't bad for the consumer. There are certain instances where it is necessary, but it's never good. A good example of that, utilities are what are called legal monopolies. And the reason being is it would be exorbitantly expensive for multiple companies to try and run water for your city, because each company would have to run their own water lines, have their own water treatment plants, things like that. It just wouldn't be possible. And so effectively, if they weren't legal monopolies that were very heavily controlled by the government, whoever could get into an area first would have a complete monopoly on something, and they would 100% abuse all of their customers. Now, anyone that's had to deal with utilities knows that they're still not great, but they could be worse. So anyway, getting back to this idea, like I said, the reason I wanted to make this video was, again, not to, get one up on the wokies or anything like that, is to point out the problems with the tactics that hyper-left activists have been using for over a decade now, which is control through fear and threats for coercion and obedience. And they've done tons and tons of psychological studies that have shown that fear and threats will only control for so long. 100% of the time, or maybe not 100%, but upper 90s, you will reach a breaking point where you can no longer threaten people to get you to obey you. And once you reach that point and the dam breaks, it is catastrophic for everyone involved, because the person that has been, or the person or the group or the people, whatever, that have been controlled through threats and fear now realize that they're no longer being controlled by another force, and they will react in very unpredictable ways. And the people that were doing the controlling, not only do they lose all the authority and power that they've been using to kind of exist, but there is always the threat of backlash and retaliation that can end up with them being destitute, or significantly worse, if you want to read into that. It is never an effective method. It is never an effective method to promote change. It never has been. It never will be. And if there is a subject that you believe very, very strongly in, and you ally with people who, even if it's not their main tactic, uses a tactic of threats and coercion to compel obedience, either you need to find a way to get the group to stop doing that, or you need to get away from that group, because it will never end well. Even if you have the most altruistic reason for doing this. And when you look at kind of the thought process and what these people claimed to be for, the idea of, allowing trans people to exist, and not discriminating people based on their the way that they express themselves, or who they're attracted to, or any of those other things that they claim to value. All of those things are not bad. Like, the idea of respecting people for who they are is a good thing. However, the way they went about doing it was wrong, and now there is a massive pushback against the entire idea of woke culture, which, again, not here to discuss my personal opinions on woke culture in general. However, 3-4 years ago is extremely popular, and now it is it's a death sentence. If your company is painted as woke, you will lose money. And if you believe that woke ideology and woke policy is actually good for the world, then congratulations, this group has just made the world worse. Because people really aren't debating the ideas behind the ideology. What they're doing is they're going, those people are monsters, and I don't want to be associated with them in any way, shape, or form. Oh, they're associated with this group? Well, that means that this group must also be monsters. That's what happens. You really want to make effective change? Boycotts, still unbelievably effective, but they are a pain in the ass to do. They take an extremely large amount of work. It takes a lot of rejection, but they can be incredibly effective. Look what happened to Bud Light. People didn't go around saying, hey, if you drink Bud Light, I'm going to call up your boss and tell him to fire you. They just said, I'm not going to drink Bud Light because I don't like what this company is doing. And Bud Light lost hundreds of millions of dollars and seemingly has completely reversed course on that particular ad campaign and every ad campaign that they've done since then. Again, not saying which group is quote unquote right or wrong. I'm saying that it was a very effective boycott. So you want to invoke economic change, learn how to do an actual boycott. And it can be very, very effective. But the idea of using threats and coercion and things like that to compel people to do what you tell them to do will never work. It will always, you will eventually find a way to threaten the right thing to get short-term obedience. But in the long term, you will always do more damage to your movement than that short-term obedience will ever do. It doesn't matter how far up you get. Laws can be rewritten and repealed. Public opinion changes faster than the weather. All this stuff is temporary, but if you focus on creating actual change and treating people with decency, there's a significantly better chance that you're going to be able to make lasting change. But threats and coercion, just don't do it. And again, Hogwarts Legacy is a perfect example of the end result of a threats-based campaign. So it happens every single time. Anyway, I gotta go do some D&D stuff. So this is all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.